Howdy folks, and welcome back. Now, I have a very important question to ask you all. Have you ever had that friend or been at a presentation where the presenter is using an absurd amount of large words for the sake of sounding smart? Or have you ever read something like this? The ceramic receptacle, engineered for the thermal retention of aqueous caffeinated solutions, facilitates the controlled infusion of aromatic phytochemicals through a porous substrate, thereby enhancing the organoleptic experience. And just sort of sat there and gone, what did I just read? Well, don't worry, because today we're going to be talking about just that. In case you were curious, by the way, I just described a coffee mug. Yes, today we are going to be talking about what makes for writing a good ability. As with everything so far in this series, there are so many little nuances that I will have to make multiple videos going over every little detail to fully encapsulate the basic question of what makes a good ability. This video, on the other hand, will be a nice introduction into the basics of good writing for an ability. We're going to go over two main concepts, jargon and word choice. Now here's the thing. These two ideas, while seemingly straightforward, are, but if you don't give them the attention they deserve, no matter how good you think your game is, it's gonna be rough for everybody else. Before we even begin though, here are just a few tips that should hopefully help you out. First, use a spreadsheet or some form of tracking so that you're not creating the same ability 5 times. That's not to say you can't have 5 abilities that let you draw cards, it's so you don't accidentally have 5 cards that all say the same thing. 2. Recognize that your card abilities, once you hit the playtest phase, will be abused, challenged, broken, warped, and fundamentally destroyed. As the creator or creators, you have an idea of what you want the ability to do, but the moment it falls into someone else's hands, there's an incredibly high chance that it's gonna break. This is fine. You're not gonna get it perfect on the first go, and honestly, that's okay. A good example of this is when I was making gates. A main mechanic was the concept of portal cards. They gave players an ability that they had access to the whole game. So, for example, the original air portal stated that you could play any air creature from your hand to the field for 0 cost, but its attack gets halved. Outside of not costing the player anything to play an air card itself being busted, it had no limit on how many times you could do this in a turn. And due to the language used, it allowed for abilities that had the stipulation of cost played to be activated. So for 0 resources, a player could play an entire field's worth of air creatures and completely destroy the balance of the game. This was quickly amended when I had the displeasure of seeing this in action during playtesting. Point is, as always, a mistake is not actually failure, it's just another stepping stone. So, with that out of the way, let's start with jargon. Now, while we're talking about jargon and word choice, it's important to recognize that these are not mutually exclusive, and they intertwine with each other pretty frequently. The words chosen for any particular ability, whether it be an ability on a card or a support item or whatever, must be specific enough to allow the player to understand what's happening, but basic enough that it's not chock full of unnecessary language. This is where creators run into the issue of jargon. Now, I want to make something clear. Jargon, or as the dictionary states, special words or expressions that are used by particular professions or groups and are difficult for others to understand, is not on its own a negative thing. Jargon is, at its core, necessary in all professions as a way for those within the profession to explain ideas in a quicker fashion. The TCG world is no different. Take Magic's use of the word tap. When a card is tapped, it does not literally mean you touch the card. It means that the card has been spent or used. It also requires that you turn the card sideways as a visual indicator. If you did not play Magic, then this word would mean nothing to you. Now, Magic is a fun case because it actually, in my opinion, straddles the line between an appropriate amount and too much jargon. Reason being, they use words such as tap, trample, blink, flying, haste, etc. Now, while there are many jargon words used by Magic, the abilities themselves do a good job of not overloading the card, and at times, they even actually explain what the word means on said card. So, while there are a lot of different terms, the player is not overloaded on any one card. Now, the opposite of this is, again, MetaZoo. Looking at the Mothman card, if we look at the ability of the card, it states, when Mothman is contracted, you may have target caster bookmark pages from the top of their spellbook until they have exactly 7 pages in their chapter, and you prophesize, name, any non-aura page. If the chosen caster has 7 or more pages in their chapter already, they do not discard or bookmark any pages. Then, reveal a page at random from the chosen caster's chapter, and if it is the pages you named, they lose the game. And if it is not the page you named, place Mothman and your entire chapter in the afterlife. The jargon words are contracted, caster, bookmark, pages, spellbook, chapter, prophesize, non-aura, and afterlife. In one ability, for one card, there are 9 different jargon words. This is too much, especially considering that a majority of these words aren't what I would call game specific. Here's what I mean. Let's look at another magic card that has a lot of text. Bright Class Gearhulk. It states first strike, trample. When this creature enters, you may search your library for up to 2 artifact, creature, and or enchantment cards with a mana value of 1 or less. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. Here, there are 7 jargon words. They are first strike, trample, creature, library, artifact, enchantment, and mana value. So let's break this down into a coherent fashion. Creature, artifact, and enchantment cards. While these are game-specific terms, they allow the player to easily infer what they are reading because it states the term cards at the end of the ability. So we know that we are talking about a specific type of card. So these 3 words are out. We'll move those to the side. First strike and trample are jargon and game-specific that, unlike the past 3, are pretty difficult to infer what they mean just based off of reading it if the game doesn't tell you what it means, if the card doesn't tell you what it means. This leaves only 2 words left, library and mana value. These can be inferred as what I would call border words that context clues would most likely allow you to figure out what they mean, library being deck and mana value being the cost of the card. This ability is stating that when played, you can search your deck for 2 in any combination of artifact, creature, or enchantment cards that have a cost of 1 or less. Show your opponent, and then put it into your hand, shuffle your deck afterwards. So overall, we have 3 words that are pretty easily inferred, 2 border words, and 2 pure jargon. Not great, but it's not awful, especially considering that this is a pretty word-heavy ability. So let's take that same deconstruction to the Mothman card. Page and caster are the only 2 words that can be inferred easily via context clues, with page being card and caster being player. Moving into the words that are just jargon, we have non-aura, bookmark, and afterlife. The reason afterlife is here and not in the 3rd category is because they use the word discard in the same ability. So is afterlife different from a discard pile or the same? The rest of the words, prophesize, spellbook, chapter, and contracted. Now, prophesize most likely deals with naming a card, since they put that in the actual ability text. Spellbook is most likely one's deck, with chapter being the hand. Reason being, again, just based off the words around it, but I can't be 100% certain, and contracted most likely deals when played, but there could be another feature to the game called contracting that itself is its own mechanic. So this leaves us with 2 words that can be easily understood, 3 words that are pure game-specific jargon, and 4 words that have to be inferred. Not great at all. Now, I've also had to reread this ability several times to write this script, so my understanding of the ability is as such. When you play Mothman, you may have your opponent draw until they have 7 cards in their hand. You then choose a card without looking and name it. If you're correct, you win the game. If you're wrong, place Mothman and your entire hand in the discard pile. Honestly, am I right? Who knows? But this is my interpretation based off of my knowledge. The major difference between MetaZoo and Magic is the unnecessary usage of jargon. MetaZoo does not need the words page, caster, spell deck, and chapter because these can be exchanged with much easier words, card, player, deck, and hand, respectively. Afterlife and contracted should stay if they are different mechanics. But if afterlife is just the discard pile, just use that. And if contracted is really just when played, use that. Non-aura and prophesized are game-specific jargon that are needed because they can't really be replaced. Basically, I can boil this whole video down to this one sentence. If you can change a word to a more generic one, do it. Your players will thank you. Now, I understand the desire to make your game have an identity by using different words, but if you overdo it, you'll kill the identity and the player's understanding of the game. Also note, I'm not even going to go into talking about the use of symbols in abilities. That should honestly be its own shorter video, but the TLDR is don't overdo it and make sure the symbols stay consistent. This being the case, as always, it's important if I'm critiquing others' work that I should always be introspective, so let's look at gates again. One of the earliest mistakes I made was not setting up a specific vocabulary to the game. Here you see the original Bergmite, which states upon playing this card, but if we look at the Rain God, it says free play. So the question comes down to what does free play mean and what does played mean? If we look at the current iterations of the card, we see that Rain God's ability changed to once per turn because it's still OP as heck and that would need to be nerfed anyways, and Bergmite now states cost played. I standardized the language so cost played indicated when you use points, while free play indicates any time it came into the field without being cost played. But this leads into a rule conundrum. If I cost play a creature and want to use its free play ability, can I? Seems like a simple rule issue. Answer would be yes. But what if certain free play abilities were only meant to be used so long as you did not expend points? As well, do you have the player have to use the ability? These two questions occur due to the lack of clear language in the ability. Now, it's important to recognize that A, your rulebook may actually explain if abilities must be used or can be used, and B, you can't idiot-proof your game. No matter how clear you make your language, someone somehow will misinterpret it or find a loophole. This is fine. This is what playtesting is for, but even the big three games still have rule shenanigans every new set. Don't beat yourself up if you can't fix every little rule. In a way, part of a TCG rule set itself are guidelines that must be adhered to, but everything inside that rule set is pretty free game, go for it. Now, I hope this video helped everyone understand the first part of ability creation. We'll get into what actually makes for a good ability, but to do that, I thought it important we first go over the jargon issue. With that, thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.